July 1884, Red Creek, Texas. The sun beat down on the dusty main street like a hammer on an anvil. Heat shimmered off the wooden planks of the general store where Jake Holloway stood waiting, one shoulder propped against the weathered post. He had been standing there for the better part of an hour, watching the eastern road like a man waiting for Judgment Day. 3 months. That was how long it had been since he sent that letter to the advertisement in the Philadelphia newspaper. 3 months of wondering if he had made a fool's choice, of second-guessing every word he had written by lamplight at his kitchen table. His neighbor, Cy Brennan, had laughed at him. "A mail-order bride, Jake. You must be desperate or crazy." Maybe both, Jake had thought. But loneliness had a way of making a man do things he never imagined. The stagecoach appeared first as a dust cloud on the horizon, then gradually took shape. 6 horses pulling the weathered coach wheels, grinding through the Texas dirt. Tucker Hayes, the driver, sat hunched on his perch reins in his gnarled hands. Jake straightened, pulling his hat lower to shade his eyes. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. The woman who had written him those careful, precise letters was about to step into his life, or turn around and leave on the next stage east. The coach rolled to a stop. Tucker set the brake and climbed down with the stiff movements of a man who had been riding since dawn. He did not announce the arrival. In Red Creek there was rarely anyone to announce it to, but today was different. Jake stepped into the sunlight. The coach door swung open. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a hand appeared, pale, slender, gripping the doorframe like it was the only solid thing left in the world. A worn black boot followed, then another. And then she was there, stepping down into the dust and the endless Texas sky. Lily Bennett. Jake's first thought was that she was smaller than he had expected. Not fragile exactly, but slight, in a way that made him think of birds that migrate thousands of miles on nothing but sheer will. Her dress was dark gray, high-necked despite the oppressive heat, practical in a way that spoke of necessity rather than choice. Her dark hair had been pulled back severely, though strands had come loose during the journey, clinging to her temples. But it was her face that stopped his heart cold. Even with the bonnet shading most of her features, even from 15 feet away, he could see the bruise. It spread from her left cheekbone up toward her eye, a sickly palette of purple and yellow-green. The kind of bruise that came from a closed fist, the kind that was at least a week old, maybe more. She stood there in the street, one hand clutching a battered carpet bag that seemed to contain everything she owned, and looked around with the expression of someone who had just jumped off a cliff and was waiting to see if she would fly or fall. Her eyes found his. 3 seconds. That was all it took for Jake to understand that whatever he had been expecting, this was something else entirely. This woman was not looking for adventure or romance. She was running, and whoever had put that mark on her face was still out there somewhere. He pushed off from the post and started toward her, slow, deliberate, keeping his hands visible at his sides. Even so, he saw her tense, saw her knuckles go white on the handle of that carpet bag. When he got within 10 feet, she took a small step backward. He stopped, raised his hands slightly, palms out. "Miss Bennett," his voice came out rougher than he intended. He cleared his throat. "I'm Jake Holloway. I've been waiting for you." She nodded once, quick, nervous, like a wild thing deciding whether to bolt or stand its ground. "Darlin'," Jake said quietly, "I don't bite. Not unless you ask." It was meant to ease the tension, to show her he understood she was afraid. That he was not the danger here. But she just stared at him, those dark eyes searching his face for something. Truth, maybe, or the lie underneath it. Behind her, Tucker was unloading a small trunk from the back of the coach, her only other possession. He set it in the dirt with a thump and tipped his hat to her. "Safe travels, miss. Welcome to Texas." She managed a small smile for him, but it died the moment she looked back at Jake. "I have a wagon just over there," Jake said, gesturing toward the hitching post where his buckskin gelding Rust stood dozing in the harness. "Ranch is about 8 miles out. We can get you settled, get you some water. I imagine you're worn out from the trip." "I'm fine." The words came fast, automatic, like a phrase she had learned to say, whether it was true or not. "All right, then." Jake bent down and picked up her trunk, light enough that he could tell it did not hold much. With his other hand, he reached for her carpet bag. "Let me help you with this," and she jerked back so fast she nearly fell. The bag pressed against her chest, like he had tried to take something vital. Her eyes went wide, showing white all around the edges. Jake immediately raised both hands again, stepping back. "I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to take it. Just thought I'd carry it to the wagon for you. But you hold on to it. That's fine. That's all right." She was breathing hard, shallow gasps that made her shoulders rise and fall beneath that gray dress. Her gaze darted past him, to the street, to the buildings, to the empty horizon. looking for escape routes. Miss Bennet, Jake kept his voice low, calm, the same tone he would use with a spooked horse. I know this is strange. I know you don't know me from Adam, but I give you my word. Whatever you're running from, it stops here. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to take anything that's yours. And if you want to get back on that coach when Tucker leaves in an hour, I'll pay your fare back east myself. No questions asked. She stared at him. He could see her mind working behind those frightened eyes, trying to decide if he was telling the truth or just saying what she wanted to hear. Finally she swallowed, loosened her death grip on the bag just slightly. I appreciate your consideration, Mr. Holloway. Each word was carefully chosen, properly enunciated. Eastern accent. Educated. I apologize for my reaction. The journey has been difficult. No need to apologize. He gestured again toward the wagon, made no move to touch her or crowd her. Whenever you're ready. She took a breath, squared her shoulders in a way that looked like it cost her something, and started walking. The wagon was nothing special, sturdy, functional. Rust dozed in the harness tail, flicking at flies. When they approached, the old gelding lifted his head and nickered softly. Lily stopped, and for the first time since stepping off that stage, something other than fear crossed her face. He's beautiful, she whispered. He's old and stubborn, Jake said, setting her trunk in the wagon bed. But he's good company. He moved to Rust's head and stroked the horse's graying muzzle. This is Rust. He won't bite unless you're made of sugar cubes. Was that almost a smile? It flickered at the corner of her mouth and vanished. May I? She took a small step closer, one hand half raised. Go ahead. She approached, slowly extending her hand toward Rust's nose. The horse stood perfectly still and let her touch him, even leaned slightly into her palm when she stroked his cheek. Some of the tension drained out of her shoulders. I had a horse once, she said quietly, still petting Rust. When I was a girl, a little gray mare named Patience. What happened to her? The tension snapped back immediately. She pulled her hand away. My father sold her when I was 13. The way she said it, flat and empty, told Jake there was a lot more to that story. None of it good. He helped her up onto the wagon seat. She flinched when his hand touched her elbow but did not pull away. Then he climbed up beside her, leaving a good foot of space between them. Picked up the reins, released the brake, and clicked his tongue. The wagon lurched into motion, wheels creaking, and they rolled out of Red Creek, heading west into an ocean of grass and sky. For the first mile, neither of them spoke. Jake kept his attention on the two ruts in the earth that passed for a road out here. Beside him, Lily sat rigid, hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead like she was trying to memorize the horizon. It's pretty flat out here, Jake finally offered. Yes. A pause. Very flat. Another half mile of silence. You must be thirsty. There's a canteen behind the seat. Water's not cold, but it's wet. Thank you. She did not reach for it. Jake pulled Rust to a stop, turned to look at her fully. Miss Bennet, I know I'm not good at this. Talking to people, I mean. Especially women. But here's the thing. We've got 8 miles ahead of us, and then a whole life after that, assuming you decide to stay. And if we're going to make this work, or even just make it bearable, we're going to have to figure out how to talk to each other. She turned to look at him. Her expression was guarded, but there was something else there too. Curiosity, maybe, or hope. What do you want to know? She asked. Everything he thought. Who hurt you? Who do I need to find? How do I make you stop looking at me like I'm about to hit you? But he could not say any of that, so instead he said, Why don't you start with something easy? Favorite color? She blinked. My favorite color. Yeah, mine's blue. Not fancy blue. Just regular blue. Sky blue. A pause. Then green. The color of spring grass. Good choice. He clicked to Rust, and the wagon started moving again. Favorite food? Strawberries. This time she answered faster, and there was the ghost of warmth in her voice. Fresh strawberries with cream. Don't get many of those out here, but we've got blackberries that grow wild by the creek in August. They're pretty good. He glanced at her. Your turn. Ask me something. She was quiet for a moment, considering. How long have you had the ranch? About 6 years. Bought it off a man who was heading back east after his wife died. He'd already done most of the hard work. Built the house, dug the well, cleared some land. I've just been trying to keep it going and make it a little better each year. Is it difficult ranching, I mean? Some days more than others. It's a lot of work for one person, but I manage. Got about 40 head of cattle, some chickens, a couple of pigs. It's not a big operation, but it's mine. He paused. Ours if you stay. She looked down at her hands. I don't know anything about ranching. Didn't figure you did, but you can learn if you want to, or not. No obligations. Everyone has obligations, Mr. Holloway. Maybe, But beating yourself up trying to meet expectations that don't make sense, that's not an obligation. That's just cruelty. He said it casually, but he saw her stiffen. He had hit close to something. They rode in silence for another stretch, but it felt different now, less tense, more like two people trying to figure each other out rather than two prisoners chained together. The land rolled past, nothing but grass and sky for miles in every direction. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. In the distance, a small herd of pronghorn grazed. "It's so empty," Lily murmured. "So much space." "That bother you?" "No." She said it quickly, firmly. "No, I think I like it. Back east, everything was so close together, so many people, so many eyes watching." Her hands tightened in her lap. "Here it feels like you could breathe and no one would hear you." They crested a low hill and the ranch came into view. A small house built from pine logs chinked with mud and prairie clay. A barn that leaned slightly to the left but was structurally sound. A chicken coop, a pig pen, a corral where two horses stood, dozing in the shade. And beside the house, standing like a sentinel, was the cottonwood tree. Massive, ancient, its gnarled branches reaching toward the sky. Lily stared at it in silence. "That tree's got to be 80 years old," Jake said. "Probably was here long before anyone built anything. Survived drought storms, lightning strikes. See those scars on the trunk? Lightning hit it twice that I know of, but it's still standing." "It's beautiful," she said softly. "I didn't expect trees." "We've got a few, not like back east, I imagine, but enough." He drove the wagon up to the house and set the brake. Before he could climb down, Lily was already moving, gathering her skirts and stepping down on her own. She stood in the yard, slowly turning in a circle, taking it all in. "Come on," Jake said, hefting her trunk from the wagon bed. "I'll show you inside." The main room was cool and dim after the bright heat outside. It served as kitchen and living area, with a wood stove in one corner, a rough-hewn table with two chairs and a single armchair by the window. Everything was clean but spare, a bachelor's efficiency. "This is the main room," Jake said, unnecessarily. He pointed to a door on the left. "That's my room." He opened a door on the right. "And this would be yours." The room was small but not cramped. A bed with a simple frame and a faded quilt. A dresser with a chipped mirror. A washstand with a basin and pitcher. A window that looked out toward the creek. And on the inside of the door, there was a lock. Lily stared at that lock for a long moment. "I installed it last month," Jake said quietly, setting her trunk at the foot of the bed. "After I got your letter saying you were coming, figured you might want your privacy." He pulled a key from his pocket and held it out to her. "This is the only key. You can lock it from the inside or the outside. Your choice. Always." She took the key slowly, like she could not quite believe it was real. Her fingers closed around it. "There's a well out back," Jake continued. "Water's safe to drink. There's soap and towels in the kitchen if you want to wash up. Help yourself to anything you need. I'll be outside checking on the animals. You take your time." He started to leave, then paused at the door. "Miss Bennett, you're not a prisoner here. You're a guest. And if you decide to stay longer than that, well, we'll figure it out. Why are you being so kind?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "This is just basic decency." "You'd be surprised how uncommon that is." Jake did not know what to say to that, so he just nodded and stepped out, closing the door behind him. He heard the soft sound of the lock turning. Then nothing. Good. She felt safe enough to lock the door. That was something. Outside, the afternoon sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon. Jake headed for the barn, his mind churning. That bruise on her face had been bad. The way she flinched from any sudden movement had been worse. Someone had hurt her. Badly. Repeatedly. And she had run all the way to Texas to get away. In the barn he found his other two horses waiting, Willow the bay mare and Chester the paint gelding. He gave them each some oats and fresh water, then checked on the chickens and pigs. The work was familiar, mindless, giving him time to think. What the hell was he doing? He had thought this would be simple. Send for a wife. She would arrive. They would get married. Settle into some kind of life together. Companionship. Partnership. Maybe eventually affection. Instead, he had gotten a woman who looked at him like he might hit her at any moment, who clutched her belongings like they might be stolen, who locked herself in her room and probably would not come out until tomorrow. But as he worked, he kept coming back to the same thought. She had traveled 1,000 miles on nothing but hope and desperation. The least he could do was give her a safe place to land. By the time he finished the evening chores, the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. He washed up at the well, scrubbing the day's dirt from his hands and face, then headed back to the house. The door to Lily's room was still closed. Quietly, he kindled a fire in the stove and started making supper. Nothing fancy, just beans and cornbread. The same thing he ate most nights, but he made extra just in case. He was pulling the cornbread from the oven when he heard the soft sound of her door opening. She stood in the doorway, still wearing the gray dress, but with her hair down now. It fell past her shoulders in dark waves, making her look younger, more vulnerable. The bruise on her face was stark in the lamplight. "I smelled food," she said hesitantly. "I hope I'm not intruding." "You're not intruding. This is your home." He gestured to the table. "Or could be. I made extra if you're hungry." "I am. Thank you." She sat down carefully, like she was still testing whether this was allowed. He served her a plate and then got one for himself, sitting down across from her. They ate in silence for a few minutes. He tried not to watch her, but he could not help noticing the way she ate. Small bites, slow, like she was forcing herself, like her stomach was in knots. "It's good," she said finally. "Simple, but good. I'm not much of a cook." They continued eating. Outside, the crickets were starting their evening chorus. The light through the window was turning golden. A sudden sound made them both look up. Hoofbeats, fast, coming toward the house. Jake stood immediately, moving to the window. Through the dusty glass, he could see a rider approaching at a gallop. Not an enemy. He recognized the horse. It was Cy Brennan. "Stay here," Jake said to Lily, then stepped outside onto the porch. Cy pulled his horse to a stop in a spray of dust, breathing hard. He was a wiry man in his 50s, with gray streaked hair and sharp blue eyes. Normally he had an easy smile. Not today. "Jake," Cy said, swinging down from the saddle, "we got a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Tucker stopped by my place on his way back to the next town. Said there was a man in Red Creek this afternoon. Eastern fellow, well-dressed, asking questions about a woman who came in on the stage, offering a $100 reward for information." Jake's blood went cold. "When, about 2 hours after you left. He's staying at the hotel. Says he's looking for his fiancée who ran away due to a misunderstanding." Cy's expression was grim. "Tucker said something about the man didn't sit right, the way he talked about her, like she was property he'd misplaced." Jake turned to look back at the house. Through the window, he could see Lily standing frozen in the main room, one hand pressed to her mouth. She had heard every word. "How long before he figures out to come here?" Jake asked. "Hard to say. Someone might mention your name, might mention you were looking for a wife," so he pulled out his tobacco pouch. "Could be tomorrow. Could be tonight, if he's determined enough." Jake made a decision. He strode back into the house. Lily was backing away from the window, eyes wide with terror. "Miss Bennett," Jake said, his voice steady, despite the urgency pounding through his veins. "That man looking for you, is he the one you were running from?" She nodded, unable to speak. "What's his name?" "Victor." The word came out like a sob. "Victor Ashford. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get married. Tonight, if possible. Tomorrow morning at the latest. Legal and official. Once you're my wife, he can't claim you. The law will be on our side." "But I—" She looked between Jake and Cy, confusion and fear warring on her face. "You don't even know me." "I know enough. You're running from someone who hurt you, someone who thinks he owns you, and I'll be damned if I let him take you." Jake took a step toward her, then stopped, remembering how she flinched. "Miss Bennett, Lily, do you trust me?" It was an impossible question. They had known each other for 3 hours, but she looked at him, really looked at him, at the steady certainty in his eyes, at the way he kept his distance even now, at the key to her room that still hung around her neck on a piece of twine she had found. "Yes," she whispered. "I trust you." "Then we do this together." He turned to Cy. "Can you ride to town? Find Judge Morrison. Tell him we need him to come out here. Tell him it's urgent." Cy was already moving toward his horse. "I'll have him here by dawn if I have to drag him." As Cy rode off into the gathering darkness, Jake turned back to Lily. She was shaking, not from fear anymore, from relief, from the sudden overwhelming realization that maybe, just maybe, she was not alone in this fight. "Whatever happens," Jake said quietly, "you're safe here. That's a promise. And I keep my promises." Outside, the cottonwood tree rustled in the evening breeze, its ancient branches spreading like shelter over the small house below. The stars were coming out one by one, piercing the darkening sky. And somewhere out there in the night, a man was hunting. But here in this moment, Lily Bennett allowed herself to breathe, really breathe, for the first time in months. Tomorrow would bring its own battles, but tonight she was safe. And that was enough. Dawn came soft and gray over the Texas prairie. Jake had not slept. He had spent the night on the porch rifle across his knees, watching the road for riders that never came. Every shadow made his hand tighten on the stock. Every sound of the wind through the grass put his nerves on edge. But the night passed quiet. Too quiet, maybe, like the stillness before a storm. The sun had climbed a hand's width above the horizon when he heard hoofbeats. 2 horses coming from town at a steady trot. Cy had made excellent time. The riders materialized from the morning haze. Cy on his roan mare, and beside him a portly man on a sturdy mule. Judge Caleb Morrison, white-haired and round-faced with the permanent squint of a man who had spent too many years reading legal documents by lamplight. He was dressed in his black suit, despite the early hour, looking every bit the circuit judge he was. White-haired and round-faced with the permanent squint of a man who had spent too many years reading legal documents by lamplight. He was dressed in his black suit despite the early hour, looking every bit the circuit judge he was. "Jake," Judge Morrison called as they approached. "Cy tells me you need a wedding performed, in something of a hurry." "Yes, sir, that's right." The judge dismounted with a grunt, pulling a worn Bible from his saddlebag. His sharp eyes moved from Jake to the house where Lily had appeared in the doorway. Even from a distance, Jake could see her hands were shaking. "This above board?" the judge asked quietly. "Both of you here of your own free will?" "Yes, sir." "Miss," Judge Morrison raised his voice slightly, "you mind stepping out here for a moment?" Lily walked toward them slowly. She had changed into a clean dress, still gray, but less travel-worn. Her hair was braided and pinned up. She looked young and terrified and determined all at once. "Are you doing this because you want to?" the judge asked her directly. "Or because someone's forcing you, 'I want to'?" Her voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. "There's a man from back east. He thinks he has a claim on me. We're marrying to prevent that claim from having any legal standing." Judge Morrison's bushy eyebrows rose. "Does this man have a legitimate claim? My father promised me to him in marriage, but I never consented. I left before the wedding could take place." The judge studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I've seen enough arranged marriages gone sour to know when a woman's running from something. If you say Mr. Holloway here is the better option, I believe you." He opened his Bible. "Let's get this done then, before your trouble finds its way out here." They gathered under the cottonwood tree. The morning light was golden now, slanting through the branches and painting patterns on the ground. Birds sang in the upper reaches. A soft breeze moved through the leaves with a sound like whispered blessings. Cy stood, as witness, his hat in his hands. Judge Morrison positioned himself facing Jake and Lily, the Bible held in front of him like a shield against whatever darkness was pursuing this young woman. "We're gathered here in the sight of God and these witnesses," the judge began, his voice taking on the formal cadence of ceremony, "to join Jake Holloway and Lily Bennett in holy matrimony. This is not a union to be entered into lightly." He looked at Jake. "Do you, Jake, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and health, till death do you part?" Jake's voice did not waver. "I do." "And do you, Lily, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and health, till death do you part?" Lily looked at Jake, at this man who had given her safety without asking for anything in return, who was standing here promising to protect her, even though it would complicate his life in ways he could not yet imagine. "I do. By the power vested in me by the territory of Texas, I pronounce you husband and wife." Judge Morrison closed his Bible. "Jake, you may kiss your bride. Or not, given the circumstances. Up to you, folks." There was a pause. Jake saw something flicker across Lily's face. Not fear this time. Something else. Something like permission, maybe, or hope. But he did not presume. Instead, he took her hand gently and raised it to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles that was chaste and respectful and somehow more intimate than anything else could have been. "Mrs. Holloway," he said softly. "Mr. Holloway," she replied, and for the first time since stepping off that stagecoach, she smiled, really smiled. It transformed her face, chasing away the shadows for just a moment. Judge Morrison pulled out the marriage certificate and laid it on a flat rock. "Just need you both to sign here, and Cy to witness." He handed Jake a pen. "Make it official." They signed, Lily Bennett becoming Lily Holloway with a few strokes of ink. Cy added his signature as witness. The judge blotted the document carefully, folded it, and tucked it into his saddlebag. "I'll file this with the county clerk first thing," he said, shaking both their hands. "Congratulations, and Mrs. Holloway, if that Eastern fellow shows up making claims you send for me, I'll set him straight on the legal facts." After the judge and Cy left, promising to keep watch for Victor Ashford in town, Jake and Lily stood together under the cottonwood tree. Married. The word felt strange, heavy with meaning neither of them had quite processed yet. "You should rest," Jake said. "It's been a long night." "So should you. You didn't sleep at all." "I'll rest later. Animals need tending." "Then I'll help." He started to protest, but something in her expression stopped him. She needed to do something, needed to feel useful, to prove she was not just a burden to be protected. "All right," he said. "Let me show you around properly." The morning work became a kind of dance. Jake showed her how to scatter feed for the chickens, and she laughed when the rooster tried to assert dominance, and she simply sidestepped him with a grace that made the aggressive bird look foolish. He demonstrated how to check the pig's water trough, and she suggested angling it differently so it would not spill when they jostled it. In the barn, she met Willow and Chester properly. The bay mare took to her, immediately nuzzling her shoulder, while Lily stroked the soft nose. Chester, true to his nature, tried to steal Jake's hat from his back pocket, and Lily's genuine laugh rang out in the quiet barn. It was a sound Jake had not heard before. Light, unguarded, beautiful. "He's incorrigible," Jake said, retrieving his hat. "He's wonderful." Lily fed Chester a piece of apple from her pocket. The horse crunched it happily, then tried to search her pockets for more. "They're all wonderful." Over the next few days, they fell into a rhythm. Jake taught her to ride, starting with gentle Willow. The first time Lily sat in the saddle, Jake saw her whole body relax in a way it never had on solid ground. Up there, she was in control. Up there, she was free. He showed her the property boundaries, the places where the creek ran deepest, the spot where wild blackberries would grow in August. She absorbed it all with an intelligence that impressed him, asked questions that showed she was thinking not just about now, but about the future, about improvements, about possibilities. On the third morning, they were working near the vegetable garden when Lily stopped, suddenly staring at the parched plants struggling in the Texas heat. "The creek is higher upstream," she said. "Yeah, ground slopes down this way. Could we dig a channel, direct some of the water down here?" She moved closer to the garden, eyes calculating distances and angles. "Not much, just enough to keep the garden from dying in the heat. We could line it with rocks to prevent erosion." Jake looked from the garden to the creek, then back to Lily. "That's smart. That's actually really smart. You know anything about irrigation?" "My grandmother had a farm in Pennsylvania. I spent summers there before my father forbade it. She had a system like this for her kitchen garden." "Then let's do it." They spent the rest of the morning digging. It was hard work. The ground was baked solid by the sun, and every shovelful felt like chipping stone. But they worked side by side, Jake breaking the hardpan with the pickaxe, and Lily following behind with the shovel. When she started to struggle with the weight of the dirt, he did not offer to take over, just slowed his pace so she could keep up. By noon, they had a rough channel carved from the creek to the garden. Jake lined it with flat stones he hauled from the creek bed, while Lily cleared debris and shaped the edges. When they finally opened the temporary dam they had built at the creek, water rushed down the new channel, spreading into the thirsty garden with a sound like satisfaction. They stood watching it, both sweating and dirty and exhausted. "We did that," Lily said softly. "Together." "Yeah, we did." The sound of hoofbeats made them both turn. A rider was approaching from the east. For one heart-stopping moment, Jake's hand went to the rifle he had started keeping close. But then he recognized the horse and the man, Ben Peterson, their neighbor from 2 miles down the road. Ben was a solid man in his 30s, weathered by sun and work, with kind eyes and a ready smile. He pulled his horse to a stop near the garden and tipped his hat. "Jake, ma'am." His eyes took in the new irrigation channel, the water flowing into the garden, and something like respect crossed his face. "Heard you got married. Came to offer congratulations." "Thank you, Ben. This is my wife, Lily." "Mrs. Holloway?" Ben tipped his hat again. "Welcome to the area. That's some clever work with the water. My Sarah's been struggling with her garden in this heat. Mind if I tell her about your system?" "Not at all," Lily said. Her voice was stronger now, more confident. "It's a simple design. I'd be happy to explain it if she'd like to visit." "She'd like that, I'm sure. Community of women out here is small. She'll be glad for the company." Ben's smile was genuine. "You folks need anything, you let us know. That's how it works out here. We look after our own." After Ben left, Jake noticed the way Lily stood a little taller, the way her shoulders had squared. She had done something useful, had been recognized for it, had been welcomed into the community, not as Jake's property, but as a person with value in her own right. That evening, as the sun began its descent and the heat finally broke, they walked down to the creek together. The new channel was flowing steadily, and the garden plants already looked less wilted. They sat on the bank, boots off feet, dangling in the cool water. "Thank you," Lily said after a while. "For what?" "For letting me help, for not treating me like I'm made of glass, for not making me feel useless." Jake picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water. 1, 2, 3 skips before it sank. "You're not useless. You're one of the smartest people I've ever met. That irrigation idea, I never would have thought of it. Would have just kept hauling buckets like an idiot." She laughed. That sound again, getting easier, more natural. "I like it here," she said quietly. "I know that probably sounds strange. We've only been married 3 days. But I like the work. I like the space. I like not having to be someone I'm not." "Who were you supposed to be back east? Decorative? Quiet? Obedient?" "My father wanted a daughter who would make advantageous connections, who would marry well and reflect well on him. When I had opinions or showed too much intelligence, he considered it a character flaw." "That's not a flaw. That's a strength." She turned to look at him. The setting sun caught in her dark eyes, turning them almost amber. "You really believe that?" "I do." They sat in comfortable silence as the light shifted from gold to orange to deep purple. The crickets started their evening chorus. A fish jumped in the creek, sending ripples out in perfect circles. Somewhere in the distance a coyote called, and another answered. Lily's hand rested on the bank between them. Jake's was a few inches away. Neither moved to close the distance, but both were aware of it. That small space, that possibility. "Jake," she said softly, "whatever happens with Victor, whatever comes next, I want you to know that this, what we're building here, it matters to me. You matter to me." He looked at her, at this woman who had been terrified 3 days ago and was now sitting beside him with her feet in the creek talking about the future like it was something they were building together. "You matter to me too," he said, and meant it with everything he had. The stars were coming out, those same endless Texas stars that had witnessed 1,000 stories of survival and hope and second chances. They would witness this one too, a mail-order bride who had found something she never expected. Not just safety, not just protection, but partnership, respect. The beginning of something that felt like it might, given time and care, become love. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Victor Ashford was still out there hunting. The threat was real. But tonight, sitting by the creek, they had channeled together Jake and Lily Holloway, allowed themselves to simply be. Two people who had chosen each other, who were choosing each other still with every shared task, every conversation, every moment of understanding, and that choice, that daily choosing, was worth fighting for. A week passed without incident. 7 days of quiet mornings and shared work of learning each other's rhythms and unspoken boundaries. 7 days of waiting for the other shoe to drop. But Victor Ashford did not appear on the horizon. No riders came asking questions. The threat remained out there somewhere, but for now it kept its distance. On the 8th evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold, Jake was splitting firewood behind the house when he heard Lily call his name. Not urgently, not in fear, just a simple summons that somehow felt significant. He set down the axe and found her sitting on the porch steps, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The bruise on her face had faded to a dull yellow, now almost gone. But there were other marks that went deeper than skin. He could see them in the way she sometimes startled at sudden sounds, in the nightmares that occasionally woke her in the dark hours before dawn. "Will you sit with me?" she asked. Jake lowered himself onto the step beside her, careful to leave space between them. The evening air was finally cooling, bringing relief from another scorching day. Somewhere out in the grassland, a meadowlark sang its complex evening song. "I want to tell you," Lily said quietly, "about before, about why I ran. You deserve to know what you've gotten yourself into. You don't owe me anything, I know, but I want to tell you anyway." She set the coffee cup aside and drew her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. "My mother died when I was 15. Heart disease, the doctor said, but I think now it was more than that. I think she just gave up. My father was a difficult man, controlling, quick to anger. After she was gone, there was no one to soften him." Jake listened without interrupting. He had learned that sometimes the best thing you could do for a person was simply be present, let them tell their story at their own pace. He had business troubles, investments that went bad, debts that kept growing. Victor Ashford was his business partner, a wealthy man, influential, twice my age. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the effort it took to keep it that way. Victor had been married twice before. Both wives died young. The first one fell down the stairs. The second took ill suddenly and was dead within a week. The hair on the back of Jake's neck stood up. "You think he killed them?" "I don't know. No one ever said anything directly. But I saw how other women looked at him at social gatherings. I saw the fear in their eyes when he paid them attention." She paused, gathering herself. "When my father's debts became desperate, Victor made him an offer. $50,000 to settle his accounts. In exchange, I would marry Victor." Jake's hands clenched into fists before he consciously relaxed them. Anger would not help her now. She needed him calm, steady. "I refused," Lily continued. "I told my father I would rather live in poverty than marry that man. He said I was being hysterical, ungrateful, that I didn't understand what was best for me." Her hand moved unconsciously to her cheek, touching the place where the bruise had been. "When I kept refusing, when I tried to leave, he made sure I understood the consequences of disobedience." "Your father did that to you?" It was not a question. "Yes, and when I still wouldn't agree, he locked me in my room. Said I would stay there until I came to my senses. Said Victor was a patient man, but his patience had limits." She looked at Jake then, and her eyes were dry but haunted. "I knew if I married Victor I would die. Maybe not right away. Maybe it would take months or years. But eventually I would have an accident or fall ill, and then I would be gone, just like the others." The meadowlark's song had stopped. The only sound was the whisper of wind through the cottonwood's branches, steady and eternal. "How did you get away?" Jake asked. "A neighbor, an older woman who had been kind to me over the years. She helped me pack in the middle of the night while my father was passed out drunk, gave me money she had been saving, took me to the train station before dawn." Lily's voice softened with gratitude. "I left without saying goodbye to anyone, took only what I could carry. I've been traveling for 3 weeks, staying in cheap boarding houses, eating stale bread, trying to make the money last until I got here. And if I had turned out to be just like your father, just like Victor." She smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Then I would have run again, and kept running until I found somewhere they couldn't follow, or until I ran out of places to go." Jake was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she had told him. $50,000. Murder disguised as accidents. A father who sold his daughter like livestock. The sheer evil of it made his stomach turn. "Lily," he said carefully, "I need you to understand something. What your father did, what Victor tried to do, that's not normal. That's not how things should be. You're not property. You're not a burden. And you sure as hell aren't something to be traded for money. I know that now. Being here working beside you, it's shown me what partnership can look like, what respect looks like." She turned to face him fully. "You've given me something I never had before. A choice. Every day you give me choices. And that means more than you could possibly know." Before Jake could respond, they heard hoofbeats approaching. His hand went instinctively to the rifle propped against the porch railing. But as the rider came into view, he relaxed slightly. It was Cy, and he was not alone. A woman rode beside him on a sturdy chestnut mare. "Evening, Jake. Mrs. Holloway." Cy tipped his hat. "Brought someone I thought you should meet. This is Doc Emma Hartley." The woman who dismounted was in her mid-40s, tall and lean, with graying blonde hair pulled back in a practical bun. She wore split riding skirts and carried herself with the no-nonsense confidence of someone who had earned respect through competence rather than demanded it through status. Her eyes, a sharp green, assessed Lily with the practiced gaze of a physician. "Mrs. Holloway," Doc Emma said, extending her hand, "I apologize for the late visit. Cy told me about your situation. I thought it best not to wait." Lily stood accepting the handshake. "My situation, Victor Ashford." Doc Emma's voice was matter-of-fact. "Cy mentioned that name and it rang a bell. I used to practice in Philadelphia before I came west. I knew of Victor Ashford, and I knew his wives." The air seemed to still. Even the wind held its breath. "Come inside," Jake said. "I think we should hear this." They gathered in the main room. Jake lit the lamps while Cy made coffee. Doc Emma settled into the armchair, her medical bag at her feet. Lily sat at the table, her hands folded tightly in front of her. "I need to examine you first," Doc Emma said gently. "With your permission, I need to document any injuries, just in case we need evidence later." Lily glanced at Jake. He nodded encouragingly, but made no move to follow when Doc Emma gestured toward Lily's bedroom. This was between them. Women's business. He would wait. 20 minutes passed. Jake paced the main room while Cy sat quietly smoking his pipe. Neither spoke. There was nothing to say yet. When the bedroom door finally opened, Doc Emma emerged alone. Her expression was carefully neutral, but Jake could see the anger simmering beneath the professional facade. "Multiple healed fractures," she said quietly. "Ribs, left wrist, evidence of repeated blunt force trauma over an extended period. The bruising on her face is recent, maybe 2 weeks old. But there are older scars, much older." She paused. "That young woman has survived years of systematic abuse." Jake's vision went red at the edges. His hands clenched so hard his knuckles cracked. Cy put a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Easy, son," Cy murmured. Anger won't help her now. Doc Emma opened her medical bag and pulled out a worn leather journal. I kept records. When I was practicing in Philadelphia, I treated both of Victor Ashford's wives. The first one, Margaret, came to me 3 months before her death. Said she had fallen down the stairs. But the injury pattern was inconsistent with a fall. It was consistent with being pushed. She flipped through pages filled with neat handwriting and careful diagrams. The second wife, Caroline, I saw multiple times over 6 months. Mysterious illnesses, stomach complaints, weakness, hair loss. I suspected poison, but could never prove it. She died before I could convince her to leave him. Doc Emma's jaw tightened. I reported my suspicions to the authorities. They did nothing. Victor Ashford was too wealthy, too connected, and dead wives tell no tales. But you kept records, Jake said. I kept records. Every examination, every suspicious injury, every ignored warning. She closed the journal and looked at Jake steadily. If Victor Ashford comes here claiming ownership of Mrs. Holloway, these records could help. They establish a pattern, a history. They won't convict him in a court of law, but they might make a judge think twice about sending a woman back into his custody. The bedroom door opened again, and Lily emerged. Her eyes were red, but she held her head high. She had changed into a clean dress, and her hair was freshly braided. When she looked at Doc Emma, there was something new in her expression. Gratitude, and the beginning of trust. "Thank you," Lily said softly, "for believing them, for believing me. So many people knew and did nothing." Doc Emma crossed the room and took Lily's hands in hers. "I failed your predecessors. I will not fail you. You have my word on that." Something passed between the two women then, an understanding, a recognition of shared strength. Doc Emma released Lily's hands and turned to Jake. "I'll speak to Marshal Stone tomorrow. Make sure he knows the full situation. In the meantime, you keep her safe, and Mrs. Holloway." She looked back at Lily. "You're not alone in this. Not anymore." After Doc Emma and Cy left, promising to return if there was any news, Jake and Lily stood together in the quiet house. The lamps cast warm light across the simple room. Outside, the stars were emerging one by one, sharp and bright in the clear Texas sky. "I didn't know someone had tried to help them," Lily said. "Victor's other wives. I thought everyone just looked the other way." Doc Emma didn't look away. She tried. And now she's trying again. For you. Lily moved to the window, looking out at the darkness beyond. "Do you think it will be enough when Victor comes? Because he will come, Jake. Men like him don't give up. They don't accept defeat." Jake came to stand beside her, close, but not touching. "Then we'll face him together. You, me, see Doc Emma, Marshal Stone. He's one man. We're a community." She turned to look at him, and in the lamplight he could see the fear in her eyes. But he could also see something else. Determination. Courage. The kind that came not from never being afraid, but from being terrified and choosing to stand anyway. "I used to think courage meant not being scared," she said. "But that's not it, is it? Courage is being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway." "Yeah," Jake said. "That's exactly what it is." They stood there as the night deepened around them, two people bound by circumstance and choice, preparing to face whatever came next. The threat was real. Victor Ashford was out there somewhere planning his next move. The danger had not passed. But something had shifted. Lily was no longer running alone. She had allies now. She had a home. She had a husband who saw her not as property, but as a partner. And she had proof documented in Doc Emma's careful records that she was not the first woman to flee Victor Ashford's cruelty. That knowledge was power, and power properly wielded could become justice. Tomorrow they would prepare. They would plan. They would gather their strength and their allies and ready themselves for the confrontation that was surely coming. But tonight they simply stood together in the warm lamplight, drawing courage from each other's presence, knowing that whatever lay ahead, they would face it not as a desperate fugitive and her reluctant protector, but as husband and wife, as partners, as two people who had chosen each other and would keep choosing each other no matter what darkness gathered on the horizon. The cottonwood tree stood watch outside, its ancient branches spreading like benediction over the small house below. It had weathered countless storms. It would weather this one too, and so would they. The heat came early the next morning, pressing down on the land like a physical weight. Jake was in the barn checking on the horses when he heard them. Two riders coming from the east at an easy lope, not the frantic pace of friends bringing news. The deliberate approach of men on business. He stepped out of the barn, one hand resting casually on his hip near where his revolver hung. The riders resolved into sharp focus as they drew closer. Both were dressed in dark suits. Despite the heat, citified men on rented horses, they clearly did not know how to ride well. Their faces were hard, professional, the kind of faces you saw on men who got paid to do things other men would not. They pulled their horses to a stop 20 feet from where Jake stood. Neither dismounted. That alone told him what he needed to know. They were not here for conversation. "You Jake Holloway?" the taller one asked. He had a scar running from his left eye to his jawline, a souvenir from some past violence. "I am. And you are?" "We represent Mr. Victor Ashford of Philadelphia. We're here to collect his property." Jake's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. "I don't know what you're talking about." The second man, shorter but broader through the shoulders, pulled a folded document from his coat pocket. "We have a contract here, signed by Augustus Bennett, transferring custody of his daughter, Lily Bennett, to Mr. Ashford in exchange for settlement of debts totaling $50,000. The contract is legal and binding." "That contract means nothing." Jake took a step forward. "Lily is my wife, legally married. Judge Morrison performed the ceremony. It's registered with the county clerk. She's not property to be transferred. She's a person. And she chose to stay here." The scarred man smiled, and there was nothing pleasant in it. "Mr. Ashford anticipated you might say something like that. He's prepared to compensate you for your trouble. $500. That's generous for a woman you've known less than 2 weeks." Before Jake could respond, the door to the house opened. Lily stepped out onto the porch. She had heard every word. Jake saw her hands trembling slightly, but she walked forward with her spine straight and her chin up. When she reached his side, she stopped, standing shoulder to shoulder with him. "I am not for sale," she said. Her voice carried across the dusty yard with surprising strength. "Not to Victor Ashford, not to anyone." The shorter man's eyes narrowed. "Miss Bennett, you need to understand the situation. Your father entered into a legal contract. Mr. Ashford has invested considerable resources in your welfare. He simply wants what's owed to him." "What's owed?" Lily repeated the words like they tasted of poison. "Let me tell you what's owed. Victor Ashford owes an accounting for 2 dead wives. My father owes me a childhood without fear. And both of them owe me the basic dignity of treating me like a human being instead of livestock." The scarred man shifted in his saddle, his hand moving toward his coat. Jake's hand dropped to his revolver, but before he could draw a rifle lever, action racked behind him. Cy Brennan had emerged from the barn, his Winchester aimed steady at the mounted men. "Gentlemen," Cy said conversationally, "in Texas we have a strong tradition of respecting a woman's right to choose her own husband. Now I suggest you ride back to wherever you came from and tell Mr. Ashford that Mrs. Holloway has made her choice, and it ain't him." The 2 hired men looked at each other, and looked at Cy's unwavering rifle, looked at Jake's hand on his gun. The scarred one's jaw worked like he was chewing over options that all tasted bad. "Mr. Ashford will not take this well," he said finally. "I reckon he won't," Jake replied. "But that's his problem, not ours. He'll come himself. And when he does, he'll bring more than 2 men. Then he'll find more than 2 rifles waiting." Jake's voice was quiet, but carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Now you've delivered your message. Time for you to leave." The riders turned their horses. The shorter one paused, looking down at Lily. "You're making a mistake, Miss Bennett. Mr. Ashford is a powerful man. He has lawyers. He has connections. This frontier justice won't protect you forever." Lily met his gaze without flinching. "My name is Mrs. Holloway, and I would rather face uncertainty with a good man than certainty with an evil one. Tell Victor that. Tell him I chose." The hired men rode away their horses, kicking up dust that hung in the still morning air. Jake, Lily, and Cy stood watching until they disappeared over the rise. Only then did Cy lower his rifle. "That was well done, Mrs. Holloway," Cy said. "Took courage to stand up to men like that." "I'm tired of being afraid," Lily said. Her hands were still shaking, but her voice was steady. "I'm tired of hiding. If Victor wants a fight, then let him come. I won't make it easy for him." Jake looked at her, this woman who had stepped off a stagecoach less than 2 weeks ago, trembling and bruised, and saw someone entirely different now. The fear was still there. He could see it in the tension around her eyes, in the quick rise and fall of her breathing, but it no longer controlled her. She had found something stronger than fear. She had found her voice. "Cy," Jake said, "can you ride to town? Find Marshal Stone. Tell him what just happened. Tell him we might need the law on our side when Victor makes his move." "Already saddled and ready," Cy said, heading for his horse. "I'll have him out here by afternoon." After Cy left, Jake and Lily stood together in the yard. The morning sun was already brutal, promising another day of punishing heat. But neither moved toward the shade. "You didn't have to come out," Jake said quietly. You could have stayed inside. Let me handle it." "No." Lily shook her head firmly. "Those days are over. The days of letting men decide my fate while I hide and hope for the best. If I'm going to build a life here, I need to stand for it, even when I'm terrified." "You were terrified." "Absolutely." A small smile touched her lips. "But you once told me that courage isn't not being scared. It's being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway. I'm learning what that means." They went back to work, but the morning had a different quality now. The threat was no longer abstract. It had taken shape, had looked them in the eye, and they had not backed down. That knowledge changed something, made the danger real, yes, but also made their resolve real, concrete, no longer just words, but action. By early afternoon, Cy returned with Marshal Caleb Stone. The lawman was a solid presence, weathered and competent, with eyes that had seen enough of life's ugliness to recognize it when presented. He listened to Jake and Lily's account without interrupting his face, giving nothing away. When they finished, he pulled out a small notebook and pencil. "Mrs. Holloway, I need to ask you some questions. They might be difficult, but I need the truth plain and complete. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "Did your father physically force you to agree to marry Victor Ashford?" "He did. When I refused, he struck me. When I continued to refuse, he locked me in my room. He said I would stay there until I agreed, or until Victor took me by force. Those were the only options he gave me." Marshal Stone wrote carefully. "And Victor Ashford, did he ever touch you inappropriately or threaten you directly?" "He came to dinner several times. The way he looked at me—" Lily's voice wavered, but held. "It was not the way you look at a person. It was the way you look at an object you intend to possess." And he spoke about his previous wives, about how delicate they were, how they could not withstand the rigors of married life. It felt like a threat wrapped in polite conversation. "Did you ever consent to marry him?" "Never. Not once. Not in any way." The marshal closed his notebook. "Then, in my judgment, any contract your father signed is void. You cannot sell a person into marriage against their will. Not in Texas. Not anywhere in this country. Not since 1865. He looked at Jake. "Your marriage is legal and binding. No amount of money or fancy Philadelphia lawyers can change that." There was a knock at the door. Jake opened it to find Ben Peterson standing there, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable. Behind him, his wife Sarah waited in their wagon. "Jake, Mrs. Holloway," Ben said. "We heard about the trouble this morning. Word spreads fast in these parts. Sarah and we wanted you to know we're with you, whatever comes." "That's kind of you," Lily said, "but this isn't your fight." "Respectfully, ma'am, I disagree." Ben's voice was firm. "When a man thinks he can ride into our community and take one of our women by force, that becomes everyone's fight. That's not how we do things here." Sarah climbed down from the wagon carrying a covered basket. "We brought supper. Figured you folks might have your hands full. It's not much, just fried chicken and biscuits. But you shouldn't have to worry about cooking on top of everything else." More riders appeared throughout the afternoon. The Reverend Thomas Grant, a dignified man in his 60s with kind eyes and a voice that had comforted the dying and married the hopeful. He sat with Lily on the porch and listened to her story without judgment, then offered a simple prayer for protection and justice. "The church stands with you, Mrs. Holloway," he said. "Sometimes the righteous path is the difficult one, but you're not walking it alone." 3 more families arrived by evening: the Mitchells, the Calhouns, the widow Jensen, and her 2 grown sons. Each brought food, words of support, and the clear message that they would not stand by while evil masqueraded as legality. As the sun began its descent, painting the western sky in shades of amber and crimson, an impromptu gathering took shape in the yard of the Holloway Ranch. Women spread blankets and set out food. Men gathered in small groups discussing strategy in low voices. Children ran through the grass, their laughter a strange counterpoint to the serious adult conversations. Lily stood on the porch, looking out at the assembly, and felt something crack open in her chest. She had spent her entire life in Philadelphia society, surrounded by people at every social function, every dinner party, every carefully orchestrated event. But she had never felt less alone than she did in that moment standing in a dusty Texas ranch yard, surrounded by people she had known for less than 2 weeks. Jake came to stand beside her. "You all right?" "I've never had this," she said softly. "People who would stand beside me, not because they had to, not because of social obligation or family connection, but because it was right, because they chose to." She looked at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Is this what community feels like?" "Yeah," Jake said. "This is exactly what it feels like." Sarah Peterson approached with a plate of food. "Mrs. Holloway, you need to eat something. Can't fight battles on an empty stomach." Lily accepted the plate with trembling hands. I don't know how to thank all of you. You already did, Sarah said firmly, by standing up, by refusing to let that man take you. Every woman here has known fear. Some of us have known worse. When we see someone fighting back, it reminds us that we're not powerless. So really, we should be thanking you. As the evening wore on and the stars began to emerge, Marshal Stone gathered everyone together. Folks, I appreciate you all coming out. Shows character, shows what this community is made of. Now, I need to be straight with you. Victor Ashford might have the law on his side in Philadelphia, but here in Texas, the law says a woman has the right to choose her husband. Mrs. Holloway made her choice legal and binding. Any attempt to take her by force will be met with the full authority of my office. And if he brings more hired guns, someone called out, then we make sure he understands that Red Creek takes care of its own, the marshal replied. I'm not asking any of you to fight, but I am asking you to be witnesses. If and when Victor Ashford shows his face here, I want eyes on everything that happens. I want testimony that will hold up in any court in the country. Reverend Grant stood. Marshal, with your permission, I'd like to say something. At the marshal's nod, he continued. Friends, we're facing a test of what we believe and what we're willing to stand for. The Bible tells us to defend the widow and the orphan, to stand against oppression. Well, Mrs. Holloway may not be a widow or an orphan, but she's someone who needs defending. And I believe with every fiber of my being that we're called to stand with her. A murmur of agreement rippled through the gathering. Jake felt Lily's hand find his in the darkness. Her grip was tight, desperate, but also strong. As the families began to disperse heading home in the cool night air, each one stopped to speak to Lily, to offer encouragement, to promise that when the time came, they would return, they would stand, they would witness. Finally, only Cy and Marshal Stone remained. The lawman swung up onto his horse. I'll be back tomorrow, going to send some telegrams. Make some inquiries about Victor Ashford. If he's got a history, I want to know about it. After everyone left, Jake and Lily stood together under the cottonwood tree. The night was quiet now except for the whisper of wind through leaves and the distant call of an owl hunting in the darkness. I was so alone for so long, Lily said, and now I'm not. How did that happen so fast? Sometimes, Jake said, the right people show up at exactly the right time. That's not luck. That's providence. She leaned against him just slightly, and he put his arm around her shoulders. They stood that way for a long time, drawing strength from each other and from the knowledge that when Victor Ashford finally came, and he would come, they would not face him alone. They would face him as part of something larger, something stronger. A community bound not by blood or obligation, but by choice. By the shared belief that some things were worth fighting for, that some people were worth defending. That justice, real justice, was worth the risk. The cottonwood tree stood witness above them, its branches spread wide against the star-filled sky. It had weathered 80 years of storms. It would weather this one too, and so would they. 3 days after the community gathering, Lily found Jake mending fence near the eastern pasture. The morning was already warm, promising another scorcher, but there was a softness to the light that spoke of changing seasons. Autumn would come eventually even to Texas. She stood watching him work for a moment, this man who had given her something she had never expected to find. Not just safety, not just protection, but partnership, respect, and something else that had been growing quietly between them like grass pushing up through hard earth. Jake, she said, I need to talk to you about something. He set down his tools and turned to face her, wiping sweat from his brow. Everything all right? Yes, better than all right, actually. She took a breath, gathering her courage. We got married because I was afraid, because Victor was coming and we needed legal protection. That was the right reason at the time, but it's not the reason I want to stay married to you. Jake went very still. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to do it again, properly this time, not hiding, not rushed. A real ceremony with the whole community there. I want to stand in front of everyone and choose you, not because I'm running from something, but because I'm running toward something, toward you, toward us, toward the life we're building together. Something shifted in Jake's expression. Surprise gave way to understanding, then to something deeper, something that made Lily's heart beat faster. You love me, he said. Not a question, a realization. I do. I love you. You saved me without asking for anything in return. You respected my boundaries when you could have demanded more. You treated me like a person with value and agency. How could I not love you? Jake crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. His hands came up to cup her face, gentle, despite their calluses. I love you too. Have for a while now, if I'm being honest. Just didn't know if you'd want to hear it. Didn't know if you'd ever be ready to hear it." "I'm ready now." He kissed her then, not the chaste kiss on the knuckles from their first wedding, a real kiss. Tender and questioning at first, then deepening as she pressed closer, her hands finding his shoulders, his chest, the strong line of his back. It was nothing like the cold, possessive advances she had endured from Victor. This was warmth. This was choice. This was two people choosing each other freely, without fear, without obligation. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Jake rested his forehead against hers. "When do you want to do this?" "Soon. Before Victor comes. I want the whole town to see. I want it to be public and witnessed and celebrated. So when he arrives, he'll understand exactly what he's facing. Not just a woman he thinks he owns, but a wife. A member of this community. Someone who belongs here." "That's smart. And brave." Jake smiled. "You're always surprising me with how smart and brave you are. I learned from you." They set the date for 2 weeks hence. Long enough to prepare properly. Not so long that Victor might arrive first. Word spread through Red Creek like wildfire. A vow renewal ceremony, a celebration, and more importantly, a statement, a line drawn in the dust. The next days passed in a flurry of activity. Sarah Peterson arrived with fabric for a dress cream-colored cotton that would not wilt in the heat. She and Lily spent hours cutting and sewing, their conversation ranging from the mundane to the profound. It felt like having the sister Lily had never had. "You're good for Jake," Sarah said one afternoon, her needle flashing in the lamplight. "He was lonely before. We all knew it. But he's different now, lighter somehow." "He's good for me, too," Lily replied. "Better than I deserve." "Don't say that. You deserve all the goodness in the world." Sarah tied off a thread. "And you're about to get a whole town's worth of it. Everyone's excited about this celebration. It's not often we get something joyful to focus on." Cy took on the task of training Lily more seriously. Every morning before the heat became unbearable, he worked with her on horseback, riding and shooting. Her natural aptitude surprised both of them. "You've got good hands," Cy observed as Lily guided Willow through a series of turns in the corral. "Light but firm. The mare trusts you." "I used to ride as a girl. Before my father sold my horse, I thought I'd forgotten how." Body remembers what the mind forgets. Give it a few more days and you'll be racing Jake. The shooting lessons were harder. The kick of the rifle bruised her shoulder. The noise made her flinch. But she persisted, understanding that this was not just about learning a skill. It was about claiming power, about being able to protect herself if needed. "You don't have to be perfect," Cy told her as she reloaded for another attempt. "You just have to be competent enough that any fool thinking of causing trouble knows you're not helpless." By the end of the first week, she could hit a target at 50 yards more often than not. It was not expert marksmanship, but it was enough. The evenings belonged to Jake and Lily alone. They would sit on the porch after supper, sometimes talking, sometimes simply existing in comfortable silence. The physical affection between them grew naturally. A hand resting on a shoulder, fingers intertwined, kisses that started soft and grew deeper as the trust between them solidified into something unshakable. One night as they sat watching the stars emerge, Lily asked, "What will you say at the ceremony? For your vows?" Jake was quiet for a moment, considering. "I'll tell the truth. That you came into my life when I had stopped hoping for more than survival. That you showed me what partnership really means. That you're the bravest person I've ever known." He turned to look at her. "What will you say? That you taught me I was worth more than I believed. That love doesn't have to hurt. That choosing someone every day is more powerful than any legal contract." She smiled. "And that I'm grateful for every moment, even the hard ones, because they brought me here." The morning of the ceremony arrived clear and bright. The heat had broken overnight, leaving the air almost pleasant. An omen, Sarah declared, a blessing. People began arriving at midday. Wagons rolled up the dusty road, families piling out with covered dishes and instruments, and children dressed in their Sunday best. The Petersons, the Mitchells, the Calhouns, the widow Jensen and her sons. Reverend Grant in his formal black coat despite the temperature. Doc Emma Hartley, who had become a frequent visitor and something like a mentor to Lily. Marshall Stone arrived with news. "Sent those telegrams, got some interesting responses. Victor Ashford has been asking questions all over Texas, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, but he hasn't made a move yet. I think he's gathering information, building a case." "Let him build," Jake said. "We've got right on our side." By 4 in the afternoon, more than 50 people had gathered. They formed a loose semicircle around the cottonwood tree, leaving space for the ceremony. Someone had strung paper lanterns in the branches. Children chased each other through the grass. The smell of roasting meat and fresh bread filled the air. Lily stood in her bedroom looking at her reflection in the small mirror. The cream dress fit perfectly simple, but elegant. Her dark hair was loose, falling in waves past her shoulders, crowned with a circlet of wildflowers that Sarah had woven that morning. She looked different than the terrified woman who had stepped off the stagecoach 3 weeks ago. She looked strong, certain, ready. There was a soft knock at the door. "Mrs. Holloway, it's time." Doc Emma's voice. Lily took a deep breath and opened the door. Jake was waiting under the cottonwood tree, and when he saw her walking toward him through the assembled crowd, his expression made her forget to breathe. Wonder, love, gratitude, all of it visible in his eyes. She took her place beside him, and Reverend Grant stepped forward, Bible in hand. "Friends and neighbors," he began, his voice carrying across the gathering, "we're here today to witness something remarkable. Jake and Lily Holloway are already married in the eyes of the law, but today they choose to renew their vows, to make public and witnessed what was once done in haste and fear, to choose each other not out of necessity, but out of love." He turned to Jake. "Do you have words you wish to say?" Jake took Lily's hands in his. His voice was steady, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Lily, when you came into my life, I was half alive, going through the motions, existing, but not really living. You changed that. You showed me what it means to be a partner, to respect someone even when you have power over them. You showed me courage, real courage, the kind that faces fear and keeps moving forward anyway." He paused, emotion thickening his voice. "You make me want to be better, kinder, stronger. And I promise you in front of all these witnesses that I will spend every day trying to deserve the gift of your love. That's my vow." Lily's eyes stung with tears, but she blinked them back. "Jake, you gave me something I never thought I'd have. Freedom. Not just from the men who wanted to control me, but freedom to be myself, to make choices, to build a life on my own terms. You never demanded, you never forced, you just offered again and again until I was brave enough to reach out and take what you were giving." She squeezed his hands. "I choose you. Today, tomorrow, for all the days I'm given. Not because I have to, because I want to. That's the difference. That's everything. And that's my vow." Reverend Grant smiled. "By the power vested in me, and in the presence of this community, who loves you both, I affirm what you've just promised each other. You are husband and wife bound by choice and love. Jake, kiss your bride." This time there was no hesitation. Jake pulled Lily into his arms and kissed her deeply, while the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Children whooped. Someone started playing a fiddle. The celebration began. Tables that had been set up earlier groaned under the weight of food. Roasted chicken and beef, fresh bread and preserves, pies and cakes. Someone tapped a barrel of beer. The fiddle was joined by a harmonica, then a guitar. Music filled the air. Jake and Lily danced under the cottonwood tree, swaying to a waltz that the musicians played with surprising skill. Other couples joined them. The widow Jensen danced with Reverend Grant. Cy partnered with Doc Emma, both of them laughing at some private joke. Children wove between the adults their own chaotic dance. "Happy?" Jake asked, his lips close to Lily's ear. "Happier than I knew was possible." They danced through 3 songs before hunger drove them to the food tables. They ate and talked and laughed, surrounded by well-wishers. The sun began its slow descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. It was Cy who saw them first. He had moved to the edge of the gathering, ever vigilant, and his body went rigid. He caught Jake's eye and jerked his chin toward the road. 3 riders were approaching. Even from a distance, Lily recognized the lead horse, the expensive saddle, the way the rider sat straight-backed and arrogant. Victor Ashford had come. The music faltered and died. Conversations stilled. Every head turned toward the approaching riders. Victor in the center, flanked by the same 2 hired guns who had come before. They rode into the celebration like darkness, seeping into light. Victor dismounted with practiced grace. He was exactly as Lily remembered, tall, handsome in a cold, calculated way. Expensive suit that must have cost more than most families here earned in a year. Dark hair graying at the temples in a way that made him look distinguished rather than old. Eyes like chips of ice. He looked at the gathered crowd with barely concealed contempt. Then his gaze found Lily, and something possessive flashed across his face. "Lily Bennett," he said, his cultured Philadelphia accent jarring against the Texas drawl that surrounded them. "It's time to stop this foolishness and come home." Before Lily could respond, the crowd moved, not obviously, not aggressively, but subtly, inexorably. People shifted position until they formed a human wall, between Victor and Lily. Men, women, even some of the older children, a barrier of bodies and resolve. Jake stepped forward, placing himself at the front of that wall. Her name is Lily Holloway, and she is home. Victor's expression did not change, but his hand tightened on his riding crop. You're the fool who thinks a frontier wedding trumps a legal contract. I have papers, signed by her father. $50,000 paid in good faith. She belongs to me. No one belongs to you. Lily's voice rang out clear and strong. She moved to stand beside Jake, not behind him. I never consented to any arrangement with you. I never agreed to marry you, and I never will. Your father had the legal right to make decisions on your behalf. My father had the legal right to nothing. Lily's hands were shaking, but her voice stayed steady. He sold me like livestock, and you paid for me like I was property. But I'm neither livestock nor property. I'm a person, and I chose Jake. I chose this life. I chose freedom over your cage. Marshal Stone moved forward, positioning himself between the two groups. His hand rested casually on his gun belt. Mr. Ashford, I'm Marshal Caleb Stone, and I need to inform you that in Texas, a woman cannot be forced into marriage. Any contract to that effect is void. Victor's eyes narrowed. I have lawyers, the best in Philadelphia. This isn't over. Perhaps not. Doc Emma stepped forward, her medical bag in hand. But you should know that I've documented Mrs. Holloway's injuries, the ones she sustained while in her father's care, and I've also documented my treatment of your two previous wives, Margaret and Caroline, the injuries they sustained, the suspicious circumstances of their deaths. She pulled out her leather journal. This is all going to the authorities in Philadelphia, along with a formal request for investigation. For the first time, Victor's composure cracked, just for a moment, a flash of something ugly beneath the civilized veneer. You have no proof of anything. Maybe not enough to convict you, Doc Emma said calmly, but enough to raise questions, enough to make powerful people very interested in your history with women who mysteriously die young. The crowd pressed closer, not threatening, not violent, but present, witnessing, making it clear through sheer numbers that Victor Ashford was outnumbered and outmatched. Reverend Grant's voice rang out clear and certain. Mr. Ashford, you are not welcome here. These people have spoken. This woman has chosen, and we will not allow you to take her. Victor looked around at the assembled faces, 50 pairs of eyes staring back at him with unwavering determination. He was a man used to power, used to getting his way. But here in this dusty Texas ranch yard, his money and his connections meant nothing. Here, community mattered more than wealth. Truth mattered more than legal contracts, and a woman's choice mattered more than a man's claim of ownership. His hand moved toward his coat. Both hired guns tensed. But before anyone could draw, Marshal Stone's revolver was out and aimed. I wouldn't, the marshal said quietly. You're outgunned and outnumbered. And if anyone fires a shot here today, I guarantee it won't end well for you. Victor's jaw worked. His hand dropped to his side. When he spoke, his voice was soft, dangerous. This isn't over, Lily. You think these people will protect you forever? I'm a patient man. I can wait. Then you'll wait forever, Lily said. Because I'm not leaving. This is my home. These are my people. And you have no power here. Victor stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and mounted his horse in one smooth motion. His hired guns followed suit. You'll regret this, he said. All of you. The only thing I regret, Lily called after him, is not running from you sooner. They watched the three riders disappear into the gathering dusk. No one moved. No one spoke. The tension held them all suspended, waiting to see if Victor would turn back, if this confrontation would explode into violence. But the riders kept going, kept riding east, away from Red Creek, away from Lily and the community that had claimed her as their own. Only when they were completely out of sight did the tension break. Someone let out a whoop. Someone else started clapping. Then everyone was talking at once, the celebration resuming with renewed vigor. The music started again. Laughter filled the air. Jake pulled Lily into his arms and held her tight. She was shaking now, the adrenaline draining away and leaving her weak. But she had done it. She had faced Victor Ashford and told him no, in front of witnesses, in front of the community, and she had won. You were incredible, Jake murmured into her hair. We were incredible, she corrected. All of us. And as the stars began to emerge overhead, as the lanterns in the cottonwood tree cast dancing shadows across the celebrating crowd, Lily Holloway understood something fundamental. She had found more than a husband. She had found a home, a family, a community that would stand between her and darkness without hesitation. Victor Ashford might come back, might try again, but he would face the same wall of resolve, the same unwavering unity, and he would lose, again and again, because some things were stronger than money or power or legal contracts. Some things could not be bought or forced or stolen. Love was one of those things, community was another, and freedom, real freedom, was worth any fight. The riders had not gone far. Jake realized at first the way a man attuned to danger feels trouble before he sees it. Victor and his hired guns had ridden over the rise and out of sight, but they had not kept going. They had circled back, approaching from the north where the barn blocked the view from the celebration. "Something's wrong," Jake said quietly to Cy. It was too easy. He wouldn't just leave. Cy's hand moved to his rifle. "I'll check the barn side." But before Cy could move, Victor appeared around the corner of the barn. He was on foot now, his expensive suit dusty, his face twisted with rage. The civilized mask had dropped completely. This was the man who had buried 2 wives, the man who saw Lily not as a person, but as property that had been stolen from him. He moved fast for a man his age, covering the ground between the barn and the gathering in long strides. His hired guns flanked him, hands hovering near their weapons. The celebration faltered again. Music died mid-note. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. "Enough of this charade," Victor snarled. His hand shot out, reaching for Lily's arm. "You're coming with me now, by force if necessary." He never made contact. Jake's fist connected with Victor's jaw in a short, brutal arc. Not wild, not excessive, just one solid punch delivered with the full weight of righteous anger behind it. Victor went down hard, landing in the dust with a grunt of pain and surprise. Blood trickled from his split lip. The 2 hired guns drew their weapons. Instantly, a dozen rifles appeared in the hands of the gathered men. S.I. Marshall Stone, Ben Peterson, the widow Jensen's sons. Even old Reverend Grant had produced a small pistol from somewhere in his black coat. "Drop them," Marshall Stone ordered, his voice carrying the absolute authority of law. "Drop them now, or I'll arrest you for assault with deadly weapons." The hired guns looked at each other, looked at the wall of armed citizens surrounding them, looked at their employer bleeding in the dirt. Slowly, carefully, they lowered their revolvers to the ground and raised their hands. "Smart choice," the marshal said. He moved to where Victor was trying to push himself up, one hand pressed to his bleeding mouth. "Victor Ashford, I'm placing you under arrest." "For what?" Victor spat blood into the dust. "That man assaulted me. I'm the victim here. For attempted kidnapping, for assault, and for questioning in connection with the suspicious deaths of Margaret Ashford and Caroline Ashford." Marshal Stone pulled out a pair of iron manacles. "I'll be sending telegrams to Philadelphia tonight, requesting a full investigation into both deaths, and Doc Emma's records will be going to the district attorney." Victor's face went white beneath the dust and blood. For the first time, real fear flickered in his eyes. Not the fear of losing property, the fear of a man who suddenly realizes his crimes might finally catch up to him. "You have no proof," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe not yet," Doc Emma said, stepping forward with her journal. "But I have detailed medical records spanning 2 years. Injuries consistent with abuse, symptoms consistent with arsenic poisoning in the second wife's case, and testimony from servants and neighbors that I documented at the time. That's enough to start an investigation. And once investigators start digging into your life, Mr. Ashford, what else might they find?" Marshal Stone snapped the manacles onto Victor's wrists. The sound of iron locking was final. "Absolute. You have the right to send for a lawyer, but you'll be doing it from a jail cell." He turned to the 2 hired guns who stood with their hands still raised, looking like men who deeply regretted their employment choices. "You 2, what are your names?" "Frank Miller," the scarred one said. "Tom Brennan," said the other. "You boys want to tell me why you're working for a man accused of murder?" They exchanged glances. Frank spoke first. "He paid us to find a missing woman. Said she was his fiancée. Said she was confused, not thinking straight. We didn't know about any murders." "You know now," the marshal said. "You have 2 choices. You can ride out of Red Creek tonight and never come back, or you can spend the night in jail as accessories to attempted kidnapping. Your choice." "We'll ride," Tom said quickly. "We want no part of this." "Then get on your horses and go. If I see either of you in this county again, I'll assume you're here to cause trouble, and I'll treat you accordingly." The 2 men gathered their guns carefully, mounted their horses, and rode away at a gallop. This time they did not look back. Victor stood in his manacles, blood drying on his chinsuit, ruined with dust, and stared at Lily with undisguised hatred. "This isn't over. My lawyers will have me out by morning. And when I get out, I'll destroy all of you, every single person who stood against me." Lily stepped forward, close enough that he could see her clearly in the lamplight. Close enough that he could see she was not afraid anymore. "No, Victor," she said quietly. "It is over. You have no power here. Your money means nothing. Your connections mean nothing. You're just a man who hurt women because you could. Because no one stopped you. But someone's stopping you now." She paused. "I'm stopping you, and I hope you spend every day in prison remembering the woman who got away." Marshal Stone pulled Victor toward his horse. "Come on. You've got a long ride to the jailhouse ahead of you." As they rode away, Victor shouting threats that grew fainter with distance, the gathered crowd stood in silence, processing what they had just witnessed. Justice. Real, tangible justice. A powerful man brought low, a vulnerable woman standing strong. The community's collective will prove stronger than wealth or influence. Then Ben Peterson started clapping. Slow at first, then faster. Others joined in. The applause built until it echoed across the prairie, a sound of triumph and vindication and hope. Jake pulled Lily into his arms. She was crying now, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Not from fear, not from pain, from release. From the overwhelming relief of finally being free. "It's over," Jake murmured against her hair. "It's really over." "I know," she gasped between sobs. "I know. I just can't believe it. I can't believe I'm safe." "Believe it," Doc Emma said, coming to stand beside them. "That man is going to face justice. Real justice. Not the kind money can buy its way out of. I'll make sure of it." The celebration resumed, but with a different energy now. More subdued, more thoughtful. People had witnessed something significant. Had participated in something that would be talked about for years. The night Victor Ashford tried to take Lily Holloway by force and learned that Red Creek protected its own. As the evening wore on and families began to depart, each one stopped to speak with Lily, to offer congratulations not just on her vow renewal, but on her courage, on her stand, on her victory. Finally, only Cy remained helping to clean up the remnants of the celebration. He worked in companionable silence, stacking chairs and collecting plates until the yard was restored to something like order. "You did good today, Mrs. Holloway," he said as he prepared to leave. "Both of you. This community is lucky to have you." "I think we're the lucky ones," Lily said, "to have found people willing to stand with us." After Cy left, Jake and Lily stood together under the cottonwood tree. The paper lanterns still glowed softly in the branches, casting gentle light across the yard. The stars were brilliant overhead, sharp and clear in the cooling air. "What happens now?" Lily asked. "Now we live," Jake said simply. "We build the life we want. We work the ranch. We become part of this community. We stop looking over our shoulders, waiting for the next threat." Just like that. Just like that. She leaned against him, and they stood in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the prairie. Crickets, wind, the distant yip of coyotes, the sounds of home. 6 months passed. Winter came gently to the Texas Panhandle that year, bringing cold but not the brutal blizzards that sometimes swept down from the north. The ranch thrived under Jake and Lily's partnership. The irrigation system they had built together kept the garden productive through the dry months. The cattle herd grew. They hired a hand to help with the heavy work, a young man named Tommy, who had drifted west looking for a fresh start. Lily became a fixture in Red Creek. She started a small school for the ranchers' children, teaching reading and writing and arithmetic in the Holloway's barn 3 days a week. The parents paid what they could, sometimes in cash, more often in trade. Fresh eggs, preserved vegetables, a side of beef. She and Doc Emma became close friends, spending hours discussing medicine and science and the ways women carved out space for themselves in a world designed to limit them. Under Doc Emma's mentorship, Lily learned basic first aid, how to set a broken bone, how to recognize the signs of serious illness. Spring arrived in a rush of green and wildflowers, transforming the brown prairie into something alive and vibrant. And with spring came news. Marshal Stone rode out to the ranch on a bright April morning, carrying a telegram. Jake and Lily were working in the expanded vegetable garden when he arrived. Lily was visibly pregnant now, 6 months along, moving with the careful grace of a woman carrying precious cargo. "News from Philadelphia," the marshal said, dismounting. His expression was satisfied, almost pleased. "Thought you'd want to hear it straight away." He handed Jake the telegram. Jake read it once, then again, then looked up with something like wonder on his face. "Victor Ashford has been convicted of 2 counts of murder," he said slowly. "Margaret Ashford and Caroline Ashford. He's been sentenced to hang." Lily's hand went to her mouth, not in horror, in relief so profound it was almost painful. "How?" she asked. "I thought there wasn't enough evidence." Doc Emma's records opened the door, Marshal Stone explained. Once the Philadelphia authorities started investigating, witnesses came forward. Servants who had seen things, doctors who had treated the wives, a pharmacist who remembered Victor buying arsenic under suspicious circumstances. It all added up. The district attorney built a case that even Victor's expensive lawyers couldn't tear down. When? Jake asked. 3 weeks from now. They wanted you to know Mrs. Holloway, in case you wanted to be there, to witness it. Lily was quiet for a long moment, one hand resting on her swollen belly. Her child, hers and Jake's, moving gently beneath her palm. New life, new beginnings. No, she said finally, I don't need to see him die. I just need to know that he can't hurt anyone else. That Margaret and Caroline's deaths have been acknowledged. That justice was served. She looked at Jake. I want to stay here, with my husband, with my community. This is where I belong. Marshal Stone nodded approvingly. That's what I figured you'd say, but I wanted to offer. He paused. There's more news. Your father, Augustus Bennett. He died 2 months ago. Liver disease. Apparently he drank himself to death after Victor's arrest. There's no estate to speak of. He died in debt. Lily absorbed this information without visible emotion. Thank you for telling me. After the marshal left, Jake and Lily stood together in the garden surrounded by new growth. Tomato plants climbing their stakes, bean vines winding through supports, squash spreading its broad leaves across the earth. How do you feel, Jake asked gently, about your father? Sad, Lily said honestly, not because he's gone, but because of what he could have been and chose not to be. He could have been a good father, a kind man. He had every advantage, education, wealth, opportunity, and he chose cruelty instead. She shook her head. But I can't carry his sins anymore. I forgive him, not for his sake, for mine, so I can be free of him completely. Jake pulled her close, careful of her rounded belly. You're the strongest person I've ever known. I learned from you. That evening, as the sun painted the western sky in shades of orange and pink, Cy arrived with his harmonica. He sat on the porch and played soft melodies that drifted across the prairie like prayers. Lily and Jake sat together on the steps, her back against his chest, his arms wrapped gently around her and their unborn child. Tell me about the future, Lily said. Tell me what you see. I see a baby born this summer, Jake said. I see us rocking that baby under this cottonwood tree. I see them learning to walk in this yard, learning to ride on Willow, growing up knowing they're loved and safe. I see more children maybe if we're blessed. I see us growing old together, watching our children have children of their own. I see us sitting on this porch when we're gray and tired holding hands and remembering the day you arrived. How scared we both were. How lucky we got. That sounds perfect, Lily whispered. Cy's harmonica played on the notes sweet and melancholy and hopeful all at once. A song about journeys and homecomings, about darkness and light, about the way broken things can heal if given time and care. 3 months later, on a July evening when the heat had finally broken and a gentle rain fell on the thirsty earth, Lily gave birth to a daughter. Doc Emma attended along with Sarah Peterson and the widow Jensen. Jake waited outside pacing the porch with Cy, jumping at every sound from within. When the baby's first cry split the night air strong and healthy and indignant, Jake felt something break open in his chest. A joy so profound it brought him to his knees. Doc Emma emerged, smiling broadly. You have a daughter, Jake, and Lily's doing fine. They're both fine. He went inside to find Lily propped up in bed, sweaty and exhausted, and more beautiful than he had ever seen her. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was the smallest person Jake had ever seen. A tiny face, eyes squeezed shut, small fists waving in outrage at being ejected from her warm home. Hello, little one, Jake whispered, sinking down beside the bed. Welcome to the world. What should we name her? Lily asked. They had discussed names for months, but never quite decided. Jake looked at his daughter, at his wife, at the life they had built together from nothing but hope and determination and love. Catherine, he said, after your mother, so she's part of this new beginning. Catherine Holloway. Lily tested the name. Yes, that's perfect. As the rain drummed softly on the roof and the baby quieted content in her mother's arms, Jake thought about the journey that had brought them here. A desperate woman fleeing violence. A lonely man hoping for companionship. 2 broken people who had found each other and somehow impossibly become whole. Outside the cottonwood tree stood, as it had through 80 years of storms, its branches spreading wide against the rain-washed sky. Lightning had scarred it. Storms had tested it. Time had weathered it. But it still stood, still grew, still provided shelter to those who sought it. Jake pulled out his pocket knife and carved carefully into the bark near the base. LH plus JH 1884. A mark that would swell and stretch as the trunk thickened with each passing year, a testament to the love that had taken root here. The years that followed were not always easy. There were droughts and hard winters. There were illnesses and injuries and the countless small struggles of frontier life. But there was also joy. 3 more children joined Catherine, a son they named James, twin girls they named Grace and Hope. The ranch expanded, the school grew, the community prospered. Lily never forgot where she had come from, never forgot the terror of those final days in Philadelphia, but she also never let it define her. She was not a victim who had survived. She was a woman who had chosen her own path and walked it with courage. On their 50th wedding anniversary, Jake and Lily sat on the porch in rocking chairs their children had made for them. The house had been expanded multiple times. 3 generations lived there now. Catherine and her husband and their children, James, who had taken over the ranch operations, the twins who had both become teachers, carrying on their mother's legacy. The cottonwood's trunk had thickened dramatically, the carved initials now stretched wide, but still legible. A great-granddaughter played in its shade, her laughter echoing off the same bark that had witnessed her great-grandmother's arrival 50 years before. 50 years, Lily said softly. Can you believe it? Some days it feels like yesterday, Jake replied. His hair was white now, his hands gnarled with arthritis, but his eyes were still the same, kind, steady, full of love. Other days it feels like we've always been together, like there was never a time before us. I'm glad I got on that stagecoach, Lily said. I'm glad I was brave enough to run, to hope, to choose you. I'm glad I sent that advertisement. Best decision I ever made. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Inside the house, someone was playing the piano that Lily had finally gotten 20 years ago. A grandchild learning scales the notes, not quite right, but filled with promise. Do you have any regrets? Jake asked. Lily thought about it, about the father who had sold her, about the man who had tried to own her, about the life she had left behind, about the bruises and fear and desperate flight. No, she said finally, not a single one. Because all of it, even the terrible parts, brought me here, to you, to this family, to this life, and I wouldn't trade a moment of it. As the stars began to emerge sharp and bright in the darkening sky, a great-grandchild approached the porch. Grandma Lily, will you tell us a story about when you and Grandpa Jake met? Lily smiled. Come here, sweetheart. I'll tell you a story about courage, about choosing love over fear, about how sometimes the scariest thing you can do is also the right thing. The child settled at her feet, joined quickly by siblings and cousins. Lily began to speak, her voice still strong despite her years. It was July 1884, and I was running from a terrible man. I got on a train not knowing where I was going, only knowing I had to get away. And that train brought me to Red Creek, Texas, to a cowboy who said something very strange when we first met. He said, "Darling, I don't bite." "Not unless you ask." The children giggled. Jake squeezed her hand. "And he kept that promise," Lily continued. "For 50 years. He never hurt me, never forced me, never treated me like property. He gave me choices. He gave me respect. He gave me love. And he taught me that real strength isn't about power over others. It's about lifting others up, about standing together, about choosing kindness when cruelty would be easier." She looked out at the cottonwood tree, at the sprawling house, at the children gathered around her feet. At the legacy she and Jake had built together, not just a family, not just a ranch, but a testament to the power of choosing love, of standing against darkness, of believing that broken things could heal. "Remember this," she told the children, "you are never powerless. You always have a choice. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose hope when everything tells you to choose fear." As the last light faded from the sky and the stars took full possession of the heavens, 3 generations of Holloway sat together on that porch, telling stories, sharing laughter, building memories that would outlast them all. And the cottonwood tree stood watch well over a century old now, its rings holding the memory of droughts and storms, of weddings and births, of 50 years of the Holloway family's love, bearing witness to the truth that some love stories start with fear, but end with forever. That some people find each other at exactly the right moment. That community and courage and choice can triumph over wealth and violence and oppression. The mail-order bride who had arrived with fear in her eyes had found something she never expected. Not just safety, not just survival, but a life overflowing with purpose and meaning and love. A home, a family, a legacy that would echo through generations. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.